I never used to mind silence. It was the safest place in our house, a small refuge between their laughter and my invisibility. But on the night everything changed. Silence felt heavier than it ever had before. My name is Lydia Marsh. I'm 30 years old and work as an office administrator for a small real estate firm in the suburbs. People say I'm organized, reliable, the kind of person who remembers everyone's birthdays, deadlines, and coffee preferences. Maybe that's why it hurts more when no one remembers mine. It was my brother's birthday. Again. The lights from the rented marquees spilled across the lawn, glimmering over the polished cars in the driveway. I stood at the window, pretending to help set the table, pretending not to count the candles on his cake. 27 of them, each one burning a little bit of me away. Before I continue my story, tell me this. Would you rather be completely forgotten by the people you love, or remembered only when they need something from you? They always said I was too quiet, too sensitive, too different from Ethan, who could light up a room with a single careless grin. Maybe that was true, but even quiet people notice when the same room forgets them over and over again. This year was supposed to be different. My 30th birthday was just 3 days after his. I had dropped hints. Small ones. A dinner out, maybe. Nothing big. Just something that said, "You see me too." But when I came home that evening and saw the giant gold balloons shaped into his initials, I understood. They hadn't just forgotten again, they'd chosen to. So I smiled. I helped pass the champagne. I even took the family photo, the one my mother later posted with the caption, "So proud of my 2 children, our golden boy and his biggest supporter." The comments poured in. I remember staring at them one after another, each "Happy birthday, Ethan," cutting deeper than any word spoken aloud. And then I decided. Not with anger, not with tears, just a quiet click inside, like a lock turning. I realized I'd been asking the wrong thing all these years. It wasn't that I wanted them to remember me. I wanted them to see me, to face what they'd built and what they'd broken. That night, I started writing in my planner again, the same small notebook where I used to track budgets and to-do lists. This time, I wrote down something different. They'll remember my birthday, and they'll never forget why. Mornings in my apartment were the only time I felt real. The sun would catch the edge of the window blinds and paint thin golden stripes across my kitchen table. I'd sit there with my coffee, my planner open, pen tapping against the margin, always the same rhythm. It wasn't just habit, it was control. In that small rented space, everything stayed exactly where I left it. No noise, no judgment, just me. At work, people relied on me the way you rely on light switches. You only notice them when they stop working. "Lydia, could you check that invoice? Lydia, can you move my meeting? Lydia, you're a lifesaver." The words always came with smiles, but they dissolved as soon as the task was done. No one ever asked if I was okay. No one ever noticed when my voice hesitated. I kept to routines. They gave me structure, a kind of invisible scaffolding. Wake up, coffee, train ride, desk, lunch alone, evening walk, planner. Some people would call it loneliness. I called it peace. But peace has a funny way of becoming emptiness when no one shares it. My family wasn't cruel, not in the obvious way. They were just selective with their love. Ethan was the center of every conversation. His name filled the house like perfume, strong, lingering, impossible to escape.
When I was younger, I used to sit on the staircase and listen to my mother's voice echo through the walls. Ethan got another award. Ethan's coach called again. I'd smile, clap, even bake him cookies sometimes. That was my place. The quiet helper, the one who made things easier. It wasn't always this way. There was a time, maybe when I was 10 or 11, when my father used to help me with school projects. He'd sit beside me, patient and proud, tracing lines on cardboard with a pencil. Then Ethan came along with his easy charm and natural brilliance, and I faded like a picture left in the sun. I learned early that disappointment sounds a lot like politeness. Lydia, you know your brother's at an important stage in his career. Lydia, we'll make it up to you next time. Lydia, don't take things so personally. Each phrase was another layer of silence. Each apology without change was another way of saying you don't matter as much. Birthdays were the purest example. Every January, Ethan's parties grew bigger, louder, more extravagant. Photo shoots, cakes taller than I was, champagne fountains. Mine came 3 days later in the shadow of leftover decorations. Sometimes my mother would hand me a small wrapped gift, usually something generic, a candle, a scarf. Once she even forgot to remove the price tag. I used to laugh it off. It's fine, I'd say. I don't need all that. And I believed it. Or maybe I wanted to. But over time, something inside me began to ache. Not from jealousy, but from invisibility. It's one thing to be unloved. It's another to be unseen. At work, I'd see coworkers celebrating birthdays with cakes and cards, messy handwriting filling the cover with affection. I'd sign them too, smiling, pretending the gesture didn't sting. On my birthday, I'd buy my own slice of cake from the cafe across the street. Red velvet. Always one candle. Always alone. I don't think anyone noticed the pattern but me. That's the cruel beauty of subtle neglect. It leaves no evidence, just memory. The year before everything changed, I'd gone home for Ethan's 26th. They'd hired a live band, photographers, even rented a dance floor. My father had given him a car, complete with a big red bow. I remember watching my brother laugh as cameras flashed around him, and my mother whispered to a friend, "He's the future of this family." Later that night, I found myself in the kitchen, washing dishes, while the others danced outside. The music filtered through the window, soft and distant. That's when I realized something simple and sharp. No one ever leaves space for the quiet ones. We have to carve it ourselves. Still, I waited another year. Part of me hoped they'd change, that maybe at 30, they'd look at me differently. 30 is supposed to mean something. Stability, respect, arrival. I had a steady job, my own apartment, no drama. Surely that counted for something. In the weeks leading up to my birthday, I sent little messages in the family group chat, links to restaurants, a photo of a cake I thought looked nice. My mother responded with emojis, my father with a thumbs up. Ethan didn't respond at all. I remember staring at that empty chat one night and thinking, this is what it feels like to disappear slowly, not in one tragic event, but in quiet moments that blur together. So I built walls. Emotional ones. I stopped expecting calls. I stopped waiting for invitations. But a part of me, deep down, still believed in fairness, that one day they'd see the imbalance and fix it. That's what hope does. It keeps you waiting for people who stopped noticing you long ago. I didn't know it then, but that same hope would be the spark that started everything, because sometimes the moment you stop hoping is the moment you start planning.
My 30th birthday fell on a Tuesday. Ordinary. Unremarkable. Like me, I suppose. The kind of day that slips through the calendar without leaving a trace. I woke up early, made coffee, and told myself I didn't care, that birthdays were just numbers. But I still wore my favorite dress, the blue one with soft sleeves, just in case someone remembered. At work, no one did. The office was busy, the printer jammed, phones kept ringing. I smiled through it, helped where needed, and waited for someone, anyone, to mention the date. Around noon, I checked my phone. One message from the bakery confirming an order pickup, and a promotional text from my cell provider. Nothing from my family. I went out for lunch alone. The cafe near the office had a small corner booth where I liked to sit. I ordered a slice of red velvet cake, tradition, and stared at the single candle the waitress placed in front of me with a polite smile. I didn't light it. I didn't make a wish. Wishes are for people who believe in being seen. That evening, I drove home under a sky bruised with clouds, the kind of evening that feels like a held breath. When I turned onto my parents' street, I saw it before I even parked. The lights, the laughter, the rows of cars lining the driveway. For a moment, my heart lifted. Maybe they did remember. Maybe the silence was a surprise in disguise. But as I got closer, I saw the banner stretched across the porch. Happy 27th, Ethan. I stood there, frozen beside my car, keys digging into my palm. My brother's music echoed down the street, that same playlist he used every year. My mother's laugh carried through the air, bright and careless. Someone handed Ethan a microphone. He was already half drunk, already basking. I walked inside quietly, unnoticed, like a guest who'd wandered into the wrong house. The living room was packed. Neighbors, friends, colleagues. The same people who'd watched thy family forget me for years and said nothing. I smiled at them anyway. I always smiled. "Lydia," my mother exclaimed when she finally saw me. "You made it! Grab a drink, sweetheart. We're about to start the slideshow." The slideshow. Every year, my mother compiled photos of Ethan's life, vacations, milestones, every smile documented. As the lights dimmed, I found myself standing in the back corner. My name was mentioned twice. Once when I was 12, another when I was 21. Both times, I was holding something for him. A trophy, a suitcase, his jacket. The laughter that followed was soft, affectionate, oblivious. No one saw me wipe my eyes. After the video, I went to the kitchen under the pretense of helping. My father stood by the counter, swirling his drink. "Big turnout this year," I said. He smiled, distracted. "Ethan deserves it. He's been working hard." I nodded. "I turned 30 today." He looked up, frowning slightly, as though I told him something mildly inconvenient. "Really? Oh, right. Well, happy birthday, sweetheart." He gave my shoulder a quick pat and turned back to his glass. That was it. No card. No gift. Not even eye contact. Long enough to register regret. I don't remember walking to the back porch, but I remember standing there in the cold, listening to the laughter inside. My phone buzzed in my hand. A reminder I'd set weeks ago. Dinner reservation at 7:30. Just in case. I deleted it. Then Ethan came out, phone in hand, still smiling for his followers. "Hey, sis," he said, voice slurred but charming. "Smile for the vlog." Before I could respond, he turned the camera toward me. "Everyone, this is my amazing sister, Lydia, the quiet one who keeps me grounded." The crowd inside cheered faintly. He slung an arm over my shoulder, still recording. "Say hi, Lydia." I looked at the lens.
the reflection of my own face in its black glass. "Hi," I said softly, and "Happy birthday, Ethan." He laughed, oblivious, and turned back toward the house. I watched him go, the perfect sun walking through a doorway of light, while I stood outside, shadowed. That's when I realized what betrayal really feels like. It isn't loud. It isn't violent. It's the moment you see someone's love measured out and know without question that you'll never be enough. I sat in my car for a long time after leaving. The laughter faded, replaced by the hum of streetlights. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked older than 30, tired, but clear-eyed. For years I had accepted crumbs and had called it love. That night I stopped. I drove home in silence, parked, and opened my planner. On a blank page, under the neat column of to-do lists, I wrote 6 words. They will never forget this year. The pen didn't tremble. My hand didn't shake. Some part of me, the one that had been waiting, watching, remembering, had finally woken up.
The morning after Ethan's party, my apartment felt colder than usual. The blue dress from last night hung over a chair, still carrying the faint scent of champagne and perfume, proof that it hadn't all been a dream. I made coffee, stared at my reflection in the dark window, and felt something sharp settle under my calm. I didn't cry, I just couldn't stop thinking. Not about what they'd done, that was old pain, but why? What made them forget year after year without guilt? It wasn't carelessness anymore, it was convenience. That afternoon, I went back to work, forcing normalcy. The rhythm of typing and ringing phones steadied me. But when my supervisor asked if I'd enjoyed the family celebration, something inside me shifted. I realized that everyone, even at work, saw my family through Ethan's lens. He was the success story. I was the supportive sister. That narrative had quietly swallowed me whole. At lunch, I opened my phone. My mother had posted a photo from the party, Ethan cutting his cake, smiling as the room clapped. Her caption read, "So proud of our shining star." Hundreds of likes, dozens of comments. I scrolled and scrolled, waiting to see if she'd remembered me this time. She hadn't. But what caught my attention wasn't the photo itself. It was a glimpse of the background. On the side table near the cake, I saw a small, unopened gift box. Gold wrapping, silver ribbon. It was mine. I recognized it. I'd left it for my mother earlier that week, something I'd bought her. She hadn't even noticed it sitting there, untouched, in her perfect photo. That image stayed in my head for days. I began revisiting every small memory that had felt off but harmless. The time my father introduced me to his colleague as Ethan's sister. The way my mother corrected people when they assumed we were close. The conversations that trailed off when I walked into a room. Patterns appeared where I'd once seen coincidence. By the end of that week, I visited my parents' home again, under the pretense of returning a borrowed charger. No one expected me. The housekeeper, Grace, answered the door. She had worked with our family since I was a child. Quiet, loyal, observant. She looked surprised to see me. "Your mother's at her club meeting," she said. "Your father's out." "That's fine," I said, stepping inside. "I just need to grab something." The house was spotless, as always. Family photos lined the hallway. Ethan on graduation day, Ethan at the office ribbon cutting, Ethan in front of a new car. The only picture of me was a group shot, partially hidden behind a vase. I don't know what drew me to my father's study. Maybe instinct. Maybe something colder. I sat at his desk, tracing the edges of a file folder labeled Marsh Realty Holdings. I wasn't supposed to open it, but after 30 years of invisibility, rules felt optional. Inside were shareholder documents, the company I worked for as an administrator. My father's name, my mother's name, and Ethan's name were all listed as major shareholders. Mine wasn't. I blinked, checked again. My name appeared nowhere, which was strange because 2 years ago, my father had told me he'd set aside a few shares for me, a small acknowledgement for my work managing contracts behind the scenes. I'd thanked him, trusted him. It was one of the few moments I thought he'd seen me. But there it was in ink. I didn't exist in their business. Ethan held the shares that were supposed to be mine, signed and notarized by my own father. The quiet in that room was unbearable. I could hear the clock ticking, my own breath shallow. I closed the folder slowly, as if gentleness could make the truth less sharp. When I turned to leave, I saw Grace standing by the door. Her eyes said she'd seen enough to understand. "You didn't hear this from me," she whispered. "But they transferred those shares last year. Your father said it was simpler one child to handle things." I swallowed. "He told me they were in my name?" Grace hesitated. "I know. He said it was to keep peace, but peace for who?" I left without another word. On the drive home, every illusion I'd ever clung to unraveled. It wasn't just emotional neglect. It was erasure, financial and personal. They had rewritten the story to fit Ethan perfectly, trimming away everything that made me inconvenient. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my table, flipping through old photos on my laptop. Birthdays, family dinners, graduations. I started noticing details I'd missed. How my father's arm always circled Ethan's shoulder. How my mother always faced him in pictures. How I was always just to the side, blurred slightly by focus. They had curated our lives like a brand. The Marsh family image, spotless, successful, and centered on their prodigal son. And I had been their unpaid editor. Around midnight, I opened my planner again. I turned to the same page where I had written, "They will never forget this year." Beneath it, I added one more line. "Visibility is power. I will take mine back." It wasn't anger driving me anymore. It was clarity, the kind that doesn't shout or tremble. It just is. The next morning, I called someone who could help me understand the documents. Marcus, a colleague from work who handled IT systems and quietly despised corporate hypocrisy as much as I did. I didn't tell him everything, not yet, but I asked if he could check something for me. By the end of the day, he confirmed. Ethan had been listed as my father's successor in the company's official registry for over a year. The paperwork had been processed using my employee credentials, the same login I'd given my father to approve expense files. They hadn't just ignored me, they'd used me. The realization didn't hurt. It solidified me, like metal cooling into shape. For the first time, I wasn't the invisible daughter anymore. I was the observer, quiet, patient, and no longer begging to be seen. And observers, when they choose to move, are the most dangerous kind.
The night I discovered the truth, something inside me broke, but not the way they expected. It wasn't a clean shatter. It was slow, deliberate, like glass fracturing under steady pressure. Every memory, every overlooked kindness, every quiet humiliation fused into something dangerous. I sat at my kitchen table, lit only by the glow of my laptop. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from fury too contained to spill. They had taken everything that should have been mine, not out of need, but out of arrogance. They believed I would never fight back. because I never had. I opened a blank document. The cursor blinked like a pulse. At the top, I typed, Phase 1, Reconstruction. This wasn't about revenge in the way movies make it look. No fire, no chaos, no screaming confrontations. I wanted something slower, something precise, something that would make them feel what I had lived through. Invisibility, helplessness, loss. I would rebuild the world they thought they controlled, but this time I'd write the story. For days, I studied every file, every email, every document connected to Marsh Realty Holdings. I knew the company inside and out. After all, I'd been the one cleaning up their messes, rewriting their reports, balancing their books. They never noticed how much access I had. They never imagined I'd use it. The more I found, the clearer the pattern became. Ethan's salary, inflated beyond reason, company funds relocated to personal expenses, my father's signature, approving bonuses Ethan never earned. They called it efficiency. I called it theft. I didn't sleep much that week. I barely ate. But for the first time, I felt alive. Not because I wanted to hurt them, but because I wanted to matter. There were moments when I'd stop and stare at my reflection, eyes swollen, voice cracking as I whispered, "You were never the weak one, Lydia. They just made you believe you were." And I would cry quietly, fiercely, until the shaking stopped. Then I'd go back to typing. Phase 2. Exposure. Marcus helped without asking too many questions. I think he knew more than he said. One night, while we were sitting in his car outside his office, he asked softly, "Are you sure about this?" I looked at him, eyes red from sleeplessness. "Marcus, they erased me from my own life. I'm just writing myself back in." He nodded. "Then let's do it carefully." We began setting up a trail, subtle at first. Marcus created a duplicate database under a hidden directory, one that mirrored Marsh's internal systems. Every file Ethan had falsified, every transfer my father had authorized, we copied and time-stamped. It was proof that couldn't be denied. But it wasn't enough for me to expose them publicly. That would end too quickly, too mercifully. No. I wanted them to unravel from within. So, I drafted letters, written in my father's formal tone, addressed to board members and investors, small inconsistencies that would later collide into suspicion. I scheduled them weeks apart, timed so that one lie would clash with another. Ethan's arrogance would do the rest. He would contradict himself publicly without realizing I'd engineered the confusion. Every move I made was quiet, patient. And with each one, I felt a little more control return, like oxygen filling my lungs after years underwater. But the emotional toll was heavier than I expected. There were nights I would stare at old photos of us. Ethan laughing with cake on his face, my mother brushing his hair back, my father proud beside him. And I'd whisper through tears, "Why wasn't I enough?" my voice would break every time. Because even now, revenge didn't erase the ache of wanting to be loved. But love, I reminded myself, shouldn't have to beg. And so I continued. Phase 3. Revelation. By the time the fiscal quarter ended, the company's internal structure began to crack. Ethan's emails grew frantic. He started calling emergency meetings. Rumors circulated among staff. Missing documents, mismatched ledgers, strange approvals no one could trace. I watched it all from my desk. Silent. Calm. When my father demanded an internal audit, I made sure the report landed on his desk first, with every signature, every transaction, every manipulation highlighted. His name and Ethan's side by side. And in the corner of the final page, I left a single handwritten note. "You forgot one thing, Dad. I see everything now." That evening, he called me. His voice was tight, brittle. "Lydia, what have you done?" I closed my eyes, forcing my tone to stay even. "I didn't do anything you didn't already sign." He went quiet. I could hear the disbelief in his silence, the dawning realization that the daughter he'd dismissed as harmless had built an entire counterattack beneath his feet. His first time. He didn't sound powerful. He sounded small. After that call, I cried harder than I ever had. Not out of regret, but because I knew there was no going back. I wasn't just dismantling their company. I was dismantling the illusion that they'd ever loved me as I was. I stood by the window, whispering to the dark city below. They'll finally know what it feels like to lose something they thought would never fight back. Over the next weeks, I made sure the story reached the right people: investors, local journalists, employees who'd been silenced. One by one, the cracks widened. Ethan's reputation crumbled first. Then my father's chairmanship. My mother stopped posting her perfect family photos. And I stayed silent. Detached, but not cold. Still hurting, but free. Because vengeance, I learned, isn't about destruction. It's about balance. It's standing in the ruins of their lies and realizing, through tears and trembling breath, that your pain finally means something. And when the last piece of their empire fell, I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just whispered to myself, voice breaking, "You remember me now."
I didn't plan for the confrontation to happen that day. It was supposed to unfold quietly, the way the rest of my plan had, whispers and tremors beneath the surface. But fate, I've learned, likes to choose the moment when silence is deepest. It was the annual shareholders meeting, the one event where my father, Ethan, and every board member gathered to celebrate their success. They had already lost investors. Headlines were whispering about internal irregularities, and yet they still showed up in suits and smiles, pretending nothing had changed. I arrived late. I wore a plain black dress, hair tight back, no jewelry, no statement, no mask, just me, the woman they'd tried to erase. When I walked through the glass doors, the air seemed to shift. Conversations slowed, people turned. Some of the staff who'd once ignored me now whispered my name. Lydia? Like I was a ghost. I walked straight to the front, the sound of my heels echoing off marble floors. My father's expression froze, somewhere between confusion and fear. Ethan looked pale. I could tell he hadn't slept. "Lydia," my father said stiffly, "this is not the time." "It's exactly the time," I answered. My voice was quiet, but steady, the kind that makes a room go still. I turned to the audience, investors, partners, faces that once smiled politely at me, but never truly saw me. You've all been told a story. That Marsh Realty is a family business built on trust and unity. But trust doesn't exist where deceit lives in every signature. My hands didn't shake. My breath was calm. Behind me, on the screen that usually displayed quarterly earnings, Marcus switched the slides. One after another. Transactions, forged approvals, emails between Ethan and my father. Proof so clear, it needed no explanation. The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, phones raised. My father stood up, his voice strained. "Lydia, turn that off now. This is the truth," I said softly. He stopped, mid-sentence. His eyes, once filled with certainty, now trembled with something almost human, fear. Ethan spoke next, desperate. "You're ruining us. You're ruining your own family." I looked at him. Truly looked at him. The brother I once defended from bullies. The one who used to hold my hand when we crossed the street. And I said quietly, "You ruined us the day you decided I didn't count." The boardroom fell silent. Even the air seemed to wait. Then I walked to the projector, pressed a button, and the last slide appeared, the audit report. Every falsified signature, every illegal transfer, ending with that single handwritten note. "You forgot one thing, Dad. I see everything now." No one spoke. No one moved. For the first time in my life, I had the room. All of them, the people who had looked through me, spoken over me, dismissed me, were listening. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just said, "I always wanted to belong. But if you won't give me a place at the table, I'll take the table itself." And then I walked out. Behind me, voices exploded. Lawyers, journalists, shareholders demanding answers. But I didn't turn back. I didn't need to. The damage was already complete. By the next morning, Marsh Realty Holdings was trending on every major business network. Investigations opened, accounts were frozen. My father resigned for health reasons. Ethan vanished from social media. And my mother, who'd been silent through the whole thing, left me a voicemail that said only, "How could you do this to your brother?" I deleted it. Because she still didn't see. This wasn't something I did to them. It was something I did for myself. For the first time in 32 years, my name meant something that wasn't attached to theirs. But vengeance, even the clean kind, leaves aftershocks. I thought I'd feel triumph. I didn't. What I felt was release. Like an ache finally exhaled. A week later, Marcus found me, sitting alone by the harbor, watching the water shift under the fading sun. He sat beside me, quiet for a long time, and then he said, "You did it." I nodded. "They'll never forget me again." He turned, searching my face. "And now? What will you do with the quiet?" I smiled faintly. "Live in it." Because the truth is, revenge isn't about shouting victory. It's about reclaiming silence and choosing who gets to fill it. Still, there were moments I'd wake at night and hear echoes of the past. My father's voice calling Ethan's name, my mother's laughter at family dinners I was never invited to. I'd whisper into the dark, "You taught me to disappear. I just learned how to make you watch." And each time, the ache lessened. Not because I forgave them, but because I finally understood them. They weren't cruel by accident. They were cruel because it was easy, until I made it hard. Months later, I received a letter from my father. A single page. No greeting, no apology. Just one line. "You've made your point. I hope you're satisfied." I folded it once, then tore it into pieces. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. Because satisfaction was never the goal, freedom was. And in that quiet, with the harbor wind in my hair and the sound of distant gulls, I finally felt it.
For years, they forgot my birthday, my achievements, my existence. Now, they'd remember the silence I left behind, the calm voice that dismantled everything they'd built on my back. No fireworks, no cruelty, just balance. Before I end this part of my story, I want to ask you something. If the people who were supposed to love you turned you invisible, would you walk away quietly, or would you make them see you one last time? Betrayal is a quiet thing. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it creeps in slowly, settling into your chest like a weight you can't name. I know that feeling well. I lived it for 30 years. The laughter that didn't include me, the birthdays that passed without notice, the subtle erasure of my existence. But I learned something vital. Betrayal is not the end. No one, not a parent, a sibling, or a friend, gets to write the final chapter of your story. The end is yours, always yours. And if you feel broken, if you feel unseen, that is not your weakness. That is your cue to reclaim what was always yours, your power, your presence, your voice. Revenge, when done with care and clarity, is more than just retaliation. It is reclaiming the life that was stolen. It is proof to yourself that even when people dismiss you, even when they erase you from their version of reality, you can take control. You can turn pain into purpose. I didn't shout. I didn't cry out loud. I acted with precision, patience, and calm, born of years of quiet suffering. And in doing so, I discovered something I had never known before: my own strength. Every step of my plan, every careful move, every moment of restraint became a lifeline, proof that I could survive, that I could rise, that I could rebuild. And I did. Slowly, deliberately, I built a life where my name carries weight, not because anyone else gives it to me, but because I claimed it for myself. I walked away from the chaos I didn't create, and in that distance, I found clarity.
To anyone listening who has been overlooked, silenced, or dismissed, your story is not over. The people who hurt you may think they hold the pen, but they don't. You do. And with patience, courage, and strategy, you can turn every betrayal into a stepping stone, every injustice into evidence of your resilience. This is how I learned that revenge isn't cruelness. It's empowerment. It's not about hurting someone else. It's about reminding yourself that your life, your worth, and your dignity cannot be stolen without your consent. When you reclaim those things, nothing can shake you again. I am Lydia Marsh, 32 years old, once overlooked, now unapologetically visible. I took the silence that once trapped me and turned it into strength. I walked away from the people who forgot me, the places that ignored me, and the life that tried to make me small. And in that quiet, I discovered the most profound truth. The comeback belongs to the one who refuses to be erased. Today, I live with intention. I wake up each morning knowing I am enough, that my voice matters, and that betrayal, no matter how deep, can be transformed into the fuel that propels you forward. If you feel invisible, unheard, or underestimated, remember this: the end isn't what your oppressor says it is. The end is what you choose to write. And when you take that pen into your own hands, there is nothing more powerful than the story you will create. Here at Revenge Bible, we turn pain into purpose and betrayal into balance. Subscribe and join us for the next transformation.